Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Squared Circle News Network. Today is July 24th, 2021. As always, I'm your host, Darren Patrick, and I want to thank you so much for being here with me today and joining me on this podcast. Uh, Glad to be back. I took last week off for some family obligations. It was my beautiful wife's birthday last week, and I absolutely wanted to do everything I could to make her day special. And I also had a graduation party with extended family, so really finding the time to put the work I need to into making these videos the best that I can. It wasn't there, and I didn't want to shortchange it or half-ass it. So, I know this isn't the best quality video on YouTube right now, but I do always want to give it my best and keep improving. So if I can't give you 100% of my time in these recordings, then I would rather just take the week off and figure it out and catch up on the next week. But things I think actually worked out for the best because last week was a decent news week, but I think it's safe to say that this week everything hit the fan, and this is probably, and I can say this with a lot of confidence, this could be one of the most historic weeks in professional wrestling history, if not one of the most game-changing and historic weeks that you're going to see. And this news speaks for itself. You know about it, you've heard about it. I want to throw my opinion and give you my 2 cents and let you know what I think. But holy cow, who saw all this coming in such a short period of time? There's been rumors, there's been speculation, there's been talk, there's been all sorts of things. But all the pieces finally seem to have come together in this puzzle. And, I talked a little while back, specifically about CM Punk. And I'm just going to jump right into it because, of course, what I'm talking about is the Daniel Bryan and CM Punk signings with AEW. And, of course, nothing's been 100% confirmed. That's the story they're going with. But a lot of credible news sources are saying that it's a done deal. Both guys are signed. And it's I believe that. I'm not going to. I feel comfortable in saying I'm not going to speculate. I'm saying these guys are signed, they're in the bag, and this is going to happen. So let's move on from there and talk about this event and talk about where it's going to go, what the after effects are, what the ripple effects are, because this is absolutely huge. Daniel Bryan is and has been for the last 11 years one of the WWE's top draws. And I'm sorry, I can't get away from this story and not talk about what WWE did wrong and why they shouldn't have even lost Daniel Bryan. This was, as happy as I am that Daniel Bryan is going to AEW and we're going to see what he's really 100% capable of and what he adds to the world of pro wrestling. This is going to be a great time for everybody because when the chains are taken off somebody as creative and talented as Daniel Bryan, you're really going to get a show like you've never seen before. And as good as AEW has been in delivering quality programming, it's about to explode in ways that we don't even realize. But what I'm saying is WWE certainly treated Daniel Bryan well. And I guess I'm going to stop calling him Daniel Bryan from this point on and go with his Bryan Danielson because he's no longer under contract with WWE. He doesn't have the rights to that name. That's a WWE trademark, and that's fine. He was Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon, before he started with WWE, and it looks like he's going to be going with that name again, most likely. But what I'm getting at is WWE treated Bryan Danielson extremely well. He was one of their top draws. They put him in quality programs. He's held multiple titles. He's never had a reason to complain or ask for releases or anything from WWE. He was a completely loyal performer, a completely loyal guy, and the respect was reciprocated. Daniel Bryan, however, is at a point now where He's been in the WWE for 11 years. He's held multiple titles, and he's really wrestled everybody that he's going to wrestle. This is where the first problem comes in with the relationship with Bryan Danielson and the WWE. He's not going to get opponents in that organization that would spark the interest of the fans anymore. He's wrestled everybody. He's wrestled Roman Reigns. He's wrestled all the top talent. There's no surprises left. There's no new matches. WWE doesn't develop their undercard talent. We see now after the Karrion Kross incident, it's 100% perfectly clear how Vince McMahon feels about NXT, and you can be assured that none of these talents are ever going to get the chance on the main roster that these developed guys get, and they keep bringing these legends back. Goldberg's coming back, for God's sakes. I mean, how many times are we going to watch Goldberg wrestle? What does he have? He almost killed the Undertaker in his match with the Undertaker because he can't do what he did before. He's not a draw anymore. Nobody cares. And, you know, they're bringing back John Cena and The Rock, which, don't get me wrong, I love John Cena and The Rock. And if John Cena and The Rock were back full time, it would certainly be a reason to turn on WWE programming. But John Cena and The Rock have careers that are well established outside of the WWE. They're both successful actors. There's no way they're coming back to the WWE full time. This is a short term, once again, band-aid situation where the ratings are absolutely horrible. Vince McMahon needs a spike. He puts John Cena on TV. He's bringing The Rock back for a short term program. And once it's over, they're gone and you're right back to the hole you were in before. So what are you accomplishing? So what I'm saying is, you know, they keep relying on calling back these legends, so to speak, and these performers who are no longer going to be under long-term contract with the WWE. And Bryan Danielson is not going to be able to put on just insane 5-star matches like he used to, because certainly there's guys in NXT that could accomplish that with him. I'm sure there's unbelievable programs that he would love to work that he'll never get the chance to do. So that's the first part of the problem. The second part of the problem is Danielson wants to expand outside of his organization. In other words, were he to stay under contract with the WWE, he still wants to go to New Japan Pro Wrestling, and absolutely, why not? You know, I watch the G1 tournament every year, and I can only imagine the impact that Bryan Danielson would have in that tournament. It just absolutely future historic matches to take place. And of course, Vince McMahon is not going to allow any of his talent, no matter who it is, to compete in organizations outside the WWE, because WWE just doesn't acknowledge the existence of anyone outside of their own entity, which is silly. Everybody knows that there are other wrestling organizations. Everybody knows there's an AEW. Everybody knows there's an Impact. There's a Ring of Honor. There's a New Japan Pro Wrestling. There's All Japan. There's indie organizations more than you could ever probably count. But WWE in their world are their own universe, and they're all that exists. So that's phase two. You're not going to get the matches that you would like to have to go and wrestle Kota Ibushi or Kazuchika Okada or Tetsuya Naito. Not going to happen. Vince McMahon won't allow that. So that's another part. And third part is Daniel Bryan, and deservedly so. He's had some pretty severe injuries during the course of his career. He wants to work a little bit of a reduced schedule. Tony Khan's absolutely going to oblige that. Tony Khan knows the gold mine he has in Bryan Danielson, and there's very little he wouldn't give to him to sign him. And obviously, Bryan Danielson didn't ask for anything unreasonable, because everything that he asked for, he got, and that's why he's now a AEW superstar. So that's what I'm saying is WWE could have easily given all these things to Bryan Danielson. They could have let him go to Japan. What's it going to hurt? It's going to hurt nothing. As a matter of fact, it's going to spark more interest to your product. I mean, everybody in the wrestling world knows who the WWE is, but everybody also knows how stagnant their product is, how bland and boring it's gotten over the last couple decades. And if you're a lapsed WWE fan and you're not watching any other wrestling right now, you haven't caught on to AEW yet, And you hear that, oh my God, Bryan Danielson is going to be wrestling in New Japan Pro Wrestling. WWE is taking part in this open door policy, forbidden door policy. Of course you're going to watch that. You're going to they have the ability to get fans back, but apparently that's not important to them. So this is the absolute only move for Bryan Danielson. He's got everything he wants. He's at the tail end of his career. I don't really know how serious his injuries are, and I'm not pointing a finger at him personally, because I would never say that he would fake an injury or over exaggerate an injury or flub an injury. But what I'm saying is, I can't help but feel the size of the man that Bryan Danielson is. He's not, the Bill Goldberg. He's not the Brock Lesnar, which is, of course, Vince's all-time favorite body type, size wrestler that he can get his hands on. He's never been in favor of these smaller, I want to say almost normal size wrestlers. So, did he, I want to say this as diplomatically as possible, did he really suffer injuries that were so close to ending his wrestling career, or did he suffer some pretty bad injuries that he could have recovered from and probably did recover from, but because Vince McMahon didn't want to keep him consistently in this main event spotlight, that he maybe force the issue and say, you know what, we need to make sure you're healthy. We need to make sure you're healed. You got to take a bunch of time off and just keep him off of programming with the excuse of Washington the heel, but with the truth being that he wants to keep Bryan Danielson off of TV so he can get his legends back in the mix and keep Brock Lesnar coming back once a year to spike ratings and just absolutely treat the rest of the roster like garbage. That could be complete conspiracy theory, and I'm not telling anybody they need to take that as fact, but it just with the WWE and with the way Vince McMahon handles things, it just could easily have that smell about it, and it wouldn't surprise me. Before I move on, one thing I forgot to mention when I started this video is, as long as you're here, as long as you're watching, please click that subscribe button. Do me a favor, smash the like, the thumbs up button. It helps the channel. It's going to help me grow. I really want to see this thing take off eventually. And if you subscribe and you click the like button, don't forget to hit the little bell icon for notifications, so every time that I do upload new content, you will be made aware of it. Now, the second half of this equation is CM Punk. And this is a really interesting one, because if this exact same situation, Bryan Danielson and CM Punk, happened 2 years ago at the first AEW All Out pay-per-view in Chicago, if this would have happened then, CM Punk would have absolutely vaporized the internet. It would have melted everything down 100%, no doubt. Because CM Punk has been that enigma for the 7 or 8 years he's been away from professional wrestling altogether. You can't count this short stint he did with this WWE backstage program where he was basically a commentator type thing on current stories. Nobody wants to see CM Punk in that role. See, they want to see CM Punk back in the ring because he was absolute fire in the WWE when he had his stint. I mean, let's face it, the pipe bomb promo is the most recognizable and talked about promo in professional wrestling probably ever. There's never been anything as talked about and as controversial, because we all know, looking back on it, what we've learned about that promo is that CM Punk 100% spoke the truth, spoke from the heart, spoke what he was really feeling. And it accomplished two things. It made the people go absolutely crazy for CM Punk because he was saying the things that they were thinking. Because we were sitting and watching WWE program, and everything that he was saying, we knew. But nobody ever had the guts, the balls to absolutely just openly talk about it like he did right on the program. So he changed the game completely there. I don't think it's ever happened to that magnitude before. I'm sure wrestlers have taken the opportunity to take shots at the promotions they work for when they get a microphone in their hand, when they're on a live camera, but nothing to that magnitude. And that was unbelievable. So, you know, at that time, CM Punk was the absolute hottest name in pro wrestling. And at that moment in history, when that All Out pay-per-view was about to happen, and we knew that CM Punk was going to be in Chicago, in the city, making an appearance, everybody just assumed that CM Punk was going to show up at All Out. Everybody figured he was under contract, that there was going to be a huge surprise. Everybody denied it. And everybody honestly denied it. Tony Khan came out and said that we tried to negotiate with CM Punk, we couldn't make a deal. Cody Rhodes came out and said we tried to negotiate with CM Punk, we couldn't make a deal. CM Punk came out, and what the truth is to this whole story, I can't imagine Tony Khan treating a negotiation with CM Punk as lax as CM Punk made it seem. He had called it just a few text messages back and forth, and the right offer wasn't made. I find that hard to believe, but this is pro wrestling, and you know what? There's different sides to every story, and usually none of them are true. So whatever the deal was, CM Punk, everybody came out and said, CM Punk's not going to be at All Out. There's no deal. It didn't happen. I'm here for this interview, and that's it, for this fan fest. And nobody bought it. Everybody thought it was a huge swerve, and everybody waited at this pay-per-view for CM Punk to come out at the last second, just like Moxley did at Double or Nothing, the first one in Las Vegas. Everybody was waiting for CM Punk to make that surprise appearance at All Out, and it never happened. And the funny thing about it is that people were mad. People were pissed off to a point that you don't even believe. The internet went nuts. People were saying, I'm done. I'll never watch another AEW show again because CM Punk was supposed to be there and he didn't show up. AEW told you the truth. They came right out and said that CM Punk is not going to be here. And it was everybody's own mind, and I get it because it's the culture of pro wrestling. It's the way they swerve. It's the way they bring surprises in. So I understand. But you know what? They were open book honest about everything, and it didn't happen. But here's what I'm getting at. At that time, at that All Out pay-per-view, with the anticipation that there was from fans, with this expectation, the buzz on the internet, everything that was happening, if CM Punk had walked out in that All Out pay-per-view, it would have been absolute chaos everywhere. The internet would have vaporized, melted down, because there wouldn't have been enough people to talk about this. There would have been podcasts and articles and stories and speculation about what's going to happen next and what's going to happen to the WWE now that CM Punk. It was an absolute incredible, perfect storm of a time for CM Punk to resurface in the wrestling world, and for whatever reason, he chose not to. Whether Tony Khan didn't offer enough money, whatever the reason was, if CM Punk had made that move then, he could quite possibly have been the most talked about wrestling personality in the history of this sport. And for whatever reason, he chose not to. So what I'm saying is now CM Punk signs a deal with AEW. And I'll say this one last time, nothing is 100% confirmed. And of course, that's going to be the case because all the parties involved want you to speculate and say, maybe he won't, maybe he will, maybe this will happen, maybe that will happen. As far as I'm concerned, it's a done deal. But CM Punk debuting with AEW today, there's a lot of luster taken off the shine of that little gem, because as big as that could have been at the first All Out, it's really not as big a deal now as it would have been then, because everybody's kind of soured to it. Everybody thinks that even though so many sources on the internet are saying this is a done deal It's happening. It's going to happen, but it's signed already, or it's going to be signed by the time the pay-per-view happens. There's an agreement in principle. They're just waiting for the ink to hit the paper. Whatever the story is, this is professional wrestling, and people are most likely soured, thinking that maybe he will, maybe he won't. At this point, I don't care anymore because I invested so much in the first time at the first All Out. I really thought he was going to be there. I thought it was a done deal, and he let us down, and maybe AEW let us down. Whatever the personal reasons behind the turn, it doesn't matter. But you can point the finger in a lot of directions, but I just think that today with these two signings, I think Bryan Danielson is the bigger signing. I think with what CM Punk could have been at the first All Out, he's just it's not as, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is a bust, because it's certainly not. CM Punk will move the needle. CM Punk will bring lapsed fans back to the AEW product. They will make the WWE work. He will make the WWE worry. It at the end of the day, it's CM Punk. But as just absolutely thermonuclear as this could have been, it's a smaller explosion now. And I'm not blaming anybody. Whatever happened back then, you would have to have been a fly on the wall to really know the truth behind the situation. But it didn't happen. It's happening now. But I consider Bryan Danielson the bigger deal in this, because he has been in the ring as recently as just a few months ago with the WWE. Just a couple months ago, he had that match with Roman Reigns on SmackDown, career versus title, where he lost. And I did a episode on that when it happened, and at that time wasn't sure, is he really done with the WWE, or is this just a storyline and he's going from SmackDown to Raw? Who knows? But now everything is fleshed out. The pieces have come together. We know what's going on. And man, I'll tell you, just the future of matches that you're going to get to see in AEW with these guys involved is monumental. You're talking about Bryan Danielson and CM Punk, two of the most electrifying performers in the WWE arsenal for as long as they have been. Now they're going up against an unlimited amount of talent, because they're not going to have that roster that so focuses on just one or two wrestlers or three or four wrestlers. You're going to see these guys are going to be able to wrestle whoever they want. They're going to be able to look at the AEW roster, and Bryan Danielson's going to be able to say, all right, I want to work a program with Hangman Page. I want to work a program with Kenny Omega. I want to work a program with Darby Allin. I want to work a program with Miro. And okay, Tony Khan's going to sign off on it, and you're going to get the matches. And it's going to be the same thing with CM Punk. And honestly, I'm very looking forward to the first time that CM Punk gets a microphone in his hand, because you've seen Jon Moxley, Miro, they were diplomatic to a point, but they really let their frustrations with the WWE come out in the things that they said. And we know that CM Punk doesn't filter things the way everybody else does. If nothing else, CM Punk is 100% honest about the way he feels about a situation. So I don't know that Tony Khan will, for the sake of just common courtesy to the opposition, because I think that even in a situation like this, I think there's lines that you probably shouldn't cross. And what they are, I don't know. But, they may have a discussion about what CM Punk is exactly going to say when he comes out for the first time. They may not. I don't know, but man, I'm looking forward to that first promo. I really am. And equally so with Bryan, I keep doing it. Bryan Danielson. He's no slouch on the microphone. Absolutely. And I don't expect much in the way of fireworks from a Bryan Danielson promo as far as what he'll have to say about the WWE. Because like I said, there was no clear, apparent issues between WWE and Bryan Danielson. There was mutual respect on either side. The only thing that stopped Bryan Danielson from continuing his career with WWE was not being able to get these things that he really wanted to accomplish in his career before his career was over. And let's be honest, he is on the south end of his career. He doesn't have all those years ahead of him like he did 10 years ago. He's wrestling for himself right now. He's wrestling because there's things that he wants to accomplish. He's got a bucket list before he retires, and I say for himself because he wants to do these things, but certainly it's with the fans in mind because he knows that the fans would love to see certain things, and he's just been that type of performer where you can't really dislike the guy. He's phenomenal in ring. He can do it all. He was trained by Shawn Michaels, and he's got a very similar style there. And just you could see when Bryan Danielson started the Yes movement, the crowd just immediately latched onto it. And you're not going to tell me that the first time Bryan Danielson gets in front of a crowd, in front of a camera on AEW television, that there's not going to be a Yes chant break out in the crowd, because that's the fans are the fans, and they know they polarize to certain people, and they latch on to those memories of the things that gave them their most pleasure in this sport, and that was certainly one of them, and they're gonna honor that, and I would say pay respect to it by doing that chant. And he may cut it off like Chris Jericho does. Chris Jericho doesn't want to relive his old days, his old characters, because he's evolved so many times. He doesn't want to be Y2J anymore. He doesn't want to be the list of Jericho anymore. He wants to be who he is now. And that's what makes Jericho arguably the greatest of all time in professional wrestling, not because he was the greatest wrestler ever, not because he was the greatest on the mic ever, but because he managed to stay at the top of the card and completely relevant for every single year that he's been in this business. He's never digressed. He's never gone backwards. He's never stagnated. Chris Jericho has this uncanny ability to know when, all right, this character has run its course. If I keep it up, it's going to get old. It's going to get stale. Time to change it up. And he's done that successfully time after time after time. You can't give me one single iteration of Chris Jericho that has not been as good, as popular as all the others. They've all been just completely over with the fans, and there's just no denying that. So that's kind of what I'm saying. You get with you're probably gonna get with Bryan Danielson, is he's not gonna want to be the same wrestler that he was in WWE. And maybe he will. I mean, maybe not exactly, but maybe to a point. Because let's face it, the guy was, be it babyface or be it heel, he was over both ways completely. He was just one of those guys, like, you can be a baby face and the people are going to love you, and you can be a heel and you can absolutely dump on the fans as hard as you want to, and they're still going to love you. And that's like a Steve Austin guy. It's a Chris Jericho guy. It's a Bryan Danielson guy. That's the way they are. CM Punk is also in that category, because CM Punk was a face, he was a heel, and either direction he went, the fans just went crazy for him. So all good. All 100% amazingly good things coming in professional wrestling from this point on. AEW is making waves like I have not seen in a long time, and there are comparisons being made to the old days in WCW when the NWO launched. And everybody seems to be in agreement that this is close to that, but that the NWO was much bigger. And I would say to a point, I agree, because at the time, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, the Clique, they were really, they weren't champions, but they were really on the top of their game, and they were really, the fans really were drawn to them because they were in that situation in WWE where they were such a fan draw that Vince McMahon really couldn't put any shackles on him. He couldn't hold him back, and they kind of did what they wanted to do. And that whole rebel mentality, people really gravitated towards that. So I see the comparison, and I see why you would say that that was bigger. But when you look at the actual talent, you can't look at who AEW has signed so far in this short period of time. You got Andrade El Idolo. You've got Malachi Black. Now you've got Bryan Danielson and CM Punk. These four guys are far more talented wrestlers than anybody that was involved in that original NWO storyline. They might not have the complete character appeal that some of those guys did. Like Scott Hall was a good wrestler. He wasn't a great wrestler. He was more popular because of his character. Because his years as Razor Ramon in the WWE was just, I was completely in with that character. Just, it was amazing. So I get the comparison, and I get why some would say that the NWO situation was much bigger, but I'm telling you that you're going to get far better matches from this quartet of wrestlers that have just signed with AEW and are about to explode. Far better matches than you would with ever Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Hulk Hogan. Those guys are the origins of the NWO, and you can't even come close to really comparing the talent. So you can't really go apples to apples. This is more apples to oranges, so it's kind of hard to say which one is the superior move. But this is a big time for AEW, and this is what I've been getting at and talking about leading up to all this. Is the WWE is going to have to really worry at some point, and this is the tipping point. This is where you're going to find out where WWE stands on their own product. Do they want to make a better product? Do they want to get their fans back? Do they want to prove that they can be the number one entity in professional wrestling again? Because they responded in spades when WCW started winning week after week after week with the ratings. WWE kept the ship afloat, kept tweaking things, and they did everything they needed to do to take the tilt back, to put it back in their favor, to win the battle, to put WCW out of business. They did it. Are they capable of responding the same way now? And my confidence level is sincerely low. I don't see that they are capable of that, because since AEW started, WWE's response has not been improving their programming, because they have not done that. They absolutely have not improved their programming. Their responses have been counter programming. Oh, AEW is going to be on Wednesday night. Let's move NXT to the USA Network and let's put them on Wednesday night at the same time. What happened? NXT absolutely lost the ratings war. They got moved to Tuesday night. Now AEW is running unopposed. And the interesting thing about that is I try not to focus too much on ratings, because ratings really shouldn't matter. What should matter is the product good? Is it good enough where the network keeps you under contract, keeps the deal alive, and keeps you on TV? And that's AEW's done that. Their first year, when nobody that starts a business in their first year should ever be profitable, they were. And before their first year was even up, Turner Networks extended their deal. So that's the important thing. It's not so much the ratings, but it's worth mentioning that I believe this is the first time, and it might have happened in the first couple episodes of Dynamite, but it hasn't really happened since then. It's been 2 consecutive weeks that AEW has broken the 1 million viewer mark in the ratings. And not only broken the mark, but the first night of Fyter Fest, they had, I don't remember the exact number, I didn't mark it down, but the second night of Fyter Fest actually increased in viewers. So they've got 2 consecutive weeks that they broke 1 million, and now the word on the internet is that Bryan Danielson and CM Punk are now all elite. I can't possibly see the ratings going back under 1 million. It could happen, but I think once these guys actually appear on TV, it's finally absolutely unarguably set in stone and it's happened. These guys are on camera. You're looking at, I would think, a ratings increase of 1.5 to 1.75 million, and at that point you're surpassing Raw in a lot of weeks, and surpassing SmackDown in a lot of weeks, and you're right there. You are right in the mix of the top wrestling shows on TV. So wow, just this is, I can't say enough about how big this is, how huge this is. But man, I'll tell you what, it's an exciting time to be a wrestling fan, and I just, week after week cannot wait to see what happens next, because it's monumental, it's historic. This is going to be something that wrestling fans are going to be talking about for years to come, just like we dwell on that and romanticize that whole period of the Attitude Era where the WWE came back and fought off WCW and not only won the battle but gave us some of the greatest wrestling personalities ever in the history of wrestling, with Steve Austin and The Rock and Kurt Angle and Shawn Michaels and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on and on. The Undertaker. Well, The Undertaker was around long before the Attitude Era, but certainly he was one of the guys that, when the mass exodus of wrestlers was leaving WWF for Turnerland, for the bigger contracts, for the more money, he was one of those guys that stayed true to Vince McMahon, to the organization, and really helped get them through that dark time and to get them back on top. So just like we look back on these times with the WWF and the WWE when they were so committed to quality programming and just making sure that they were the top company and the top show on TV, this is the way we're going to be looking back on this, on AEW, for years to come, and what they've done here and what they've accomplished, and just how really fan-centric they are. They care so much about the fans, and I think the biggest thing in this is caring about the fans is so important, because if you're not giving the fans the programming they want, just like in the WWE, how their ratings keep dropping and people keep leaving, that's what happens. So being in tune and aware of what the fans want and giving them what they want is so important, but they legitimately care about their performers, and good for them, because this is a job where your career expectancy is not very long, especially with the way wrestlers go now, with the way they wrestle. There's a lot of more high risk things going on. So if you can get 10, 11 years out of your career, that's great. If you can get more than that, if you can push 20 years, that's phenomenal. And the only way to do that is to make sure you take care of your performers. And that's what AEW does. To a man, I challenge you to find any interview with anybody. I just watched something the other day. Danhausen filled in for Renee Paquette on her Oral Sessions podcast and interviewed Ethan Page, and they talked about a bunch of different things. But at the end of the interview, Page he made it a point to make sure he talked about AEW and how healthy and how great of a culture and environment it is to be in, and how much that the organization cares about the performers. And everybody, to a man, that interviews that's a part of AEW says the same thing. You don't hear the sour grapes and the things like you do in the WWE, people wanting to get out of their contracts, people getting tired of having money taken away from them, from their personal projects being interfered with. You don't get any of that. AEW is successful, they're making money, and they're not going to deny their performers the chance to do the same thing themselves. So good for them. And just as a side note on this, with all the signings that AEW has made so far, of course, the CM Punk and Bryan Danielson are going to be the biggest. It doesn't matter who else they sign. Every signing that they bring in, I think, is important, but nothing of this magnitude. But There's a lot of strong rumors going around right now that Buddy Murphy is also going to be a future signee for AEW, and has been called WWE's best kept secret. And I would say that's a very true statement, because there's been so many pushes from people within the organization to get Buddy Murphy in programs on the main roster. He had this ridiculous program with Rey Mysterio's daughter, which I think was just completely. This is the kind of thing that WWE does. They care more about these soap operatic storylines than they do about the in-ring performances and having the wrestlers perform to the maximum capabilities of what they have. So just, you didn't see what Buddy Murphy was capable of in the WWE. He's been compared to Kenny Omega, which is a massive compliment. And if he is that good, or if he's close to being that good, and AEW can get him under contract and get him in a couple programs, the tides are turning, my friends. It's coming to a point where WWE will eventually get overtaken. I strongly believe that now. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, but I see the tides are changing, the balance is shifting, and you could be at some point here looking at a new sheriff in town. I'm going to leave that at that. As more news becomes available, as things change, I will jump back on and let you know what I know and let you know what I think. But I want to move on just for a moment. I want to talk about Slammiversary, the Impact pay-per-view from last weekend. And, well, when I say, last weekend, last Saturday night, I got to tell you, I'm thrilled that Kenny Omega once again successfully retained the Impact Championship. He had what was a really good hardcore match with Sami Callihan. And the absolute highlight of the show was the surprise appearance by New Japan Pro Wrestling's Neverweight Champion, Jay White, the Switchblade. Jay White is the Never Openweight Champion. He is the leader of the Bullet Club in New Japan Pro Wrestling right now. And he came out to, he had a stare down with the Elite, with the Good Brothers and with Kenny Omega, but the heart of this thing was him making an appearance to come after David Finlay, which he did deliver his Blade Runner finisher to Finlay in the ring amidst the chaos of this confrontation. And then he came out on this last Impact Zone show on Thursday, and once again stated the reason he was there was because he was coming after David Finlay. And the Elite seemed to be a secondary thought on this program, and I don't understand this. I don't get why Impact is getting the benefit of having Kenny Omega and other members of the Elite on their program, and having New Japan Pro Wrestling's Jay White and whoever else is going to come out on their programming. Why is Jay White not on AEW? And it's making me crazy, because I want New Japan Pro Wrestling to thrive unbelievably. I want them to be just amazing juggernauts in the world of professional wrestling, because the level of talent and the quality of programming that they put on in ring deserves every bit of it. But for some reason, they keep pushing this New Japan agenda in Impact. And what are you gaining from this? New Japan Pro Wrestling. If somehow anybody in the world of New Japan Pro Wrestling can see this podcast and answer my question, please. What are you expecting to gain by putting your performers on Impact Pro Wrestling? I mean, their ratings are minuscule. They're on Access TV. You got the occasional New Japan guy coming on to AEW TV, not to the level of Jay White. And this is what I'm saying. You get Jay White, he is unquestionably, in my opinion, one of the top 3 heels in pro wrestling right now. And I would say he's one of the top 2 heels in pro wrestling right now. You put him on AEW programming and get the eyes on him that you're getting the million+ viewers on TNT a major network that pretty much everybody has compared to Access, there's your benefit. But instead, you keep putting this talent on Impact. And I don't understand. And my mind kind of juggles this around. I look at it a couple different ways. I look at the fact that Kenny Omega, the belt collector, has the Impact Championship. Okay, so in exchange for Kenny Omega adding this to his arsenal of belts, give us the opportunity to bring these big names from New Japan and put them on our programming and hopefully increase our ratings. You know, to increase your ratings, people got to see what you're doing. And how many people are watching Access TV? You'd be better off having your Impact talent appear on AEW television and then have their interactions with the New Japan people on AEW television also. If the million plus viewers see this on AEW TV on their programming, they're going to find out where Access TV is, and if they know that these guys that they want to see so badly are going to make these appearances, then they'll find Impact and they'll watch. I don't see really how this benefits anybody. And with this current influx of talent, with these names that are coming, and that could be another reason. Maybe they don't want to water down what's going on with New Japan by making them a secondary storyline to all these names that are signing with AEW right now. I don't know. All I can say is that I hope that in the future, the near future, and the future going forward, that there is just a lot more interaction between New Japan and AEW, because I think the dream matches that you could possibly have are nothing that you could ever get from Impact. And I've said this before that I'm not going to bash anybody in professional wrestling. I can't do it. And anybody that puts themselves out there, that risks their health and their body to do this job and to entertain, I get it. But you can watch wrestling shows and you can see just by watching, hey, this guy is really talented. Hey, this guy's pretty talented, but he's nowhere near what that guy is. And that's what you're seeing on Impact Wrestling. Impact Wrestling is a combination of up-and-comers and guys that are good, but just not good enough to be in the spotlight on one of the bigger shows. And it is what it is. You can't really argue that point. I mean, you can argue it. Everybody's got their opinion. I've said from day one that everything that comes out of my mouth on this show is just my opinion. But it just seems like a lot of lost opportunities right now, and I don't know what's in the plan with Tony Khan and the Forbidden Door and what's going to be happening moving forward. But I sincerely hope that we get a lot more interaction between New Japan and AEW, because that's where you're going to see the electricity. I'm going to sign off for now. As I said, as things change, as more news becomes available, I'm going to do my best to jump on here. If it means getting extra show the weekend to put it all together, I will do that. But right now, just be grateful you're a wrestling fan. Enjoy the ride. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me and watching this episode. Again, if you're here, please subscribe. Please hit that like button, and don't forget the bell icon for notifications for every time that I upload new content. So until next time, once again, I'm Darren Patrick. Thank you so much for joining me. And as always, please be good to yourself and be good to each other. Thanks.